Hello again and welcome back to our course on PowerPoint 2013. In this section we're going to look at printing a presentation. It's actually a very easy thing to do in PowerPoint 2013, but there are quite a few things to consider. And when we say printing a presentation, there are actually a number of different versions of the presentation that you might want to print. Now, for the purposes of this section, I'm going to use example 10 from the examples provided as part of the course. And with example 10 open, I'm going to click on File to go into Backstage View, and then click on Print. And that brings me a number of options. Now, the option I want to look at first is the one that's in the middle of the settings down here. Mine currently says full page slides, which is normally the default on a new installation of PowerPoint 2013. So let me click on the drop down there, because that will explain the main options that we have. Now, if you start with the top, there are what we call the print layout options. If you choose the first option, they're full page slides, what you will print will be one full page for each slide in your presentation. Generally speaking, presentations are landscape, as I mentioned earlier on, but there's no reason you can't have other shapes. But basically you get one slide to a page. The second option is what are called notes pages. Now, the notes pages also have one slide to a page, but with notes pages you see the slide in the top half of the page and you see the speaker notes in the bottom part. Generally speaking, notes pages would be the option that you would use if you wanted to print out the pages to accompany you when you're making a presentation. So if you want to be able to read the notes while you're giving the presentation, or perhaps you want to take the notes away and check them and mark them up before you make the presentation, maybe read them on the train on the way home, something like that, you want to be able to see the slides with the notes. Generally speaking, you wouldn't be giving the notes to the audience, although of course there's no reason that you shouldn't. The third option is the outline option, and with the outline option you're looking at the outline text. So you're seeing basically a resume of the text of the presentation outlined. So you won't see the images, but you'll see the text. So they are the top three options, and we'll look at each of those individually in just a moment. Now, below that we have the handout options, and these are the options that are most often used when you want to present a set of handouts to the audience. Very often this will be in the form of sheets of paper with a number of slides on. Now, the handout options, there are several here. First one is there one slide printed in the middle of a portrait page, 2 slides to a page, 3 slides to a page, and so on, right down to 9 slides vertical or 9 slides horizontal in terms of how the slides are arranged on the paper. And this will normally be the option you want. Say you've got a presentation with, say, 40 slides in it. This means that it's going to take maybe 10 sheets of paper to hold the presentation. Now, of course, there are several options offered here so that you can choose something that suits your presentation, which will partly depend on the nature of the information in the presentation. If you, for instance, have some diagrams that are really quite detailed, you may not want to make them appear too small on the paper, because if you've got a very detailed diagram that's, say, quite difficult to read when it's on a single slide, squeezing 9 of those onto a sheet of paper might well make the diagrams completely illegible. So you have to use your own judgment in terms of your own presentation as to what the best combination is for these handouts. But whether you're printing the slides, the notes pages, the outline, or the handouts, basically Print in Backstage View is the place you come to. So now let's look at the main options that are available to us. Forget the print button for the moment, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Top option here, the number of copies that you want. Straightforward enough, you can use the tumblers to set the number, or of course you can just type the number in. Now we come to the choice of printer. My printer is set by default to Microsoft OneNote, partly because I very rarely actually use printed materials nowadays, and partly because when I do, I tend to put them into OneNote first to have a look at them just to make sure I'm happy with the way they're going to come out. There is also an option here by default to go to the Microsoft XPS document writer. That's the Microsoft equivalent of PDF format. I do have a physical printer attached here. It is ready. I'm going to use that in just a moment. And I also have the facility to print to a fax. Now, of course, the list of printers you have will certainly be different to mine, and you have other options at the bottom here, such as add printer. So if you've just realized you didn't have your printer plugged in, or PowerPoint 2013 is not available to it, or whatever, you can go into the add printer routine there. And you also have an option to print to file. Basically, if you're going to print to paper, which is what I'm going to simulate here, you choose your physical printer, in this case the HP printer that I want, and then once PowerPoint 2013 has acquainted itself with your printer, you can then go in and look at printer properties. Now, printer properties is an area that it's impossible to generalize about, because if I click on printer properties for my printer, the dialog that I see will be different to the dialog that you see for your printer, unless of course you've got exactly the same printer as me. Some of the features will be the same, and I'm going to quickly go through one or two of those features now, but it's very likely that many of them will be different. So for instance, depending on the make and model of printer that you've got, the paper sizes that are available may vary. I normally have my paper size set to A4, which people in the UK and Europe generally use. In the USA, you will probably have your paper size set to, say, letter. You can also specify things for my printer like borderless printer if you want the printing to go right up to the edge of the paper. You also have an option here, in the case of my printer, that once you've got a set of settings that you like, you can save them as a quick set of settings and come back to those at any later time knowing that you've got them set correctly. The resolution of the print here can be set, and then we have other things that I can set, such as effects, shrinkage, growth, watermarks, how I want it finished, do I want to print on both sides, many other options. And really these vary so much that, as I say, it's impossible to generalize. But depending on the printer you've got, make sure you actually look at all those, maybe use the manual, either electronic manual or paper manual that came with the printer, and just make sure you understand what the settings mean. Sometimes if you're trying to print, say, slides and the quality of the images on them is not good, it may not be the fault of PowerPoint 2013 at all, it could well be your settings on your printer. So make sure you get used to what the settings are, have a look at them, and if you can save the settings, whether you've got them the way that you want, save them and then make sure you flick back to that setting whenever you've got a print to do. I'm going to assume from this point onwards that your printer has its properties set correctly. So let's get ready now to do an actual print. And I'm going to choose first the middle setting, the one that we had right at the beginning, full page slides. And with full page slides selected, I now look at the setting above it, which currently says print all slides, print entire presentation. If I click on that drop down, I have the option to say print all slides, print a selection, print the current slide, or print a custom range. Now with custom range, I can actually type in the numbers of the slides that I want. So I could say, for instance, print 1, 3, and then say 5 to 6, and that would print slides 1, 3 and 5 to 6. And having decided which slides I want to print, my next decision is, would I like those slides collated or not? So I've specified 2 copies. Would I like them printed as 2 copies of slide 1, 2 copies of slide 3, and then 2 copies of slide 5 followed by 2 copies of slide 6? Or would I like 1, 3, 5, 6 followed by 1, 3, 5, 6? If I say collated, I get the latter option. If I say uncollated, then I get all the copies of slide 1, then all the copies of slide 3, etc. I'm going to stick with collated. And the final setting I have down here is the color setting, where I can say I'd like them printed in color, in grayscale, or in pure black and white. Now what you use here will largely depend on the purposes for which you're going to use this printout. If you really want to give your audience full colour copies of the slides, then obviously colour is the way to go. If you really only want to give them a grayscale version of each of the slides, or you're doing some kind of proofreading exercise and you don't need the full colour version, then you can specify grayscale or even pure black and white. So basically, for printing a selection of slides from the presentation, as defined by this custom selection here, they are the decisions that you would normally need to make in order to do that print. However, there's one other thing you can do here, which you probably notice right at the bottom, which is that you can also say edit header and footer. So if you'd like to put a header and footer onto these slides, click on edit header and footer, and it gives you the option of putting date and time, slide number, footer on, and so on. And if you're dealing with notes and handouts, it gives you an option of doing the same for the notes and handouts as well. Note the little preview on the right there, which shows you where notes and handouts, headers and footers, page numbers, etc. will appear. And while we're on that subject, if I just go back into the presentation again, go to the View tab, don't forget, I mentioned these earlier on in the course, the handout master you can go into and edit, so you could add header, footer, date, page number and so on here and format those. And similarly, the notes master, you can do the same with that as well. You can determine not only the layout of the notes master, but you can also put header, footer, etc. on there as well. So let's turn our attention back now to the print and look at the other things that we might need to print from our presentation. So we go back into that selection box there, and this time let's look at notes pages. Now when we make a selection here, we also get a preview on the right, so we can see what these are actually going to look like. On example 10, the one that we're looking at, I actually added some notes to those, so give you some idea of what that preview looks like. And I can use the scroll bar and the associated controls on the right to step through. Note that I've made a selection here of just 4 slides, 1, 3 and 5 to 6. It's a custom selection. The custom range still applies to the notes pages, so you're only going to see 4 of these notes pages, the ones I specified there in the custom range. So that's the notes pages. Now let me suppose that I want to print a full set of handouts. So click there again, change from notes pages to I think 4 slides horizontal. And let me go back, I'm going to get rid of custom range and say print all slides. So what you'll see now is how those 4 would look on my handouts. Now you may think that's rather wasted space really, because the individual slide images on that portrait piece of paper seem a little bit lost. But sometimes this is quite a good way to give out handouts, because it leaves the audience room to write their own notes above and below the slides. They can draw their own little arrows and diagrams and so on. So giving people space on the pages is sometimes a good idea. In this case I've said print all slides, so I get 2 sheets of paper with all 7 slides on. And of course I should also point out that when you've made all of your choices, you do need to press the print button. So you go over here, you press print, and what you have selected and specified will be printed. And just one other thing to mention, if you go back into the presentation, on the quick access toolbar there are generally 2 buttons, a quick print button and a print preview and print button. My print preview and print button is not actually enabled at the moment, so let me just enable that. If I click on the quick print button, it does a quick print to the default printer at the moment. And if I click on the print preview and print button, it takes me back into Backstage View, into the print page, and then I can go in and adjust my settings, as well as getting a preview of how my print will look if I go ahead with it. So that's it on printing in PowerPoint 2013. I'll see you in the next section.